Testing. Yeah. I won't talk about it. Well, I probably don't need the microphone, but we're going to use it because we're recording. So this will be available to people that couldn't be here tonight to go back and watch it. So I want to welcome our crowd this afternoon to our second community forum. And my name is Dana Greason, and I am the current president of the school board. And I'm joined tonight by other board members, Cindy Herring on my right, and Sheila Ford on my left, and our superintendent, Dr. Murphy, our director of instruction.
Instructional services.
Yes, I knew it was a long title. Steve Campbell, Hayden Fusilier on this end, who is director of support services. So tonight we have invited you all here to answer any questions you might have about the upcoming millage election that's going to happen on May 21st and provide you with a little more information. And so what we're going to do is Dr. Murphy is going to have just a few minutes of an overview for everybody, and then we will open it up for questions. You can come to one of the mics here on the floor. There will be a 5-minute time limit, which, you know, we can be flexible about in a group this size. So we would just ask that you, when you come to the microphone, you tell us your name and then state your question or comment. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Murphy.
Okay, John.
And let him give you an overview.
All right, well, welcome, good evening. Last time we come together was a forum in the village. It was pouring down rain, and this evening we have probably the most beautiful evening that we've had so far. So we've had polar opposites, and I think anytime we do forums, we never really know who can take time to come out. We want to thank each of you for being here. The intent this evening is to provide you with some additional information and resources so you can continue to study this issue yourself. And so John is up in the booth, and what I'd like for him to do is I'm going to step over here where I can kind of see and kind of engage you guys. Dana said a few minutes. When I gave this presentation last, it does take about 30 minutes to 25 minutes to go through the information. When you came in, you had an opportunity to access a brochure and this written document that's on the screen. John, what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and take us back to just a Google browser. Open up a new tab like any user would do if they sit down at their computer and they want to find something and they just enter in Fountain Lake School District. And so I'm going to guide you through the website to the content that we're going to be viewing here tonight, because you're not going to be able to absorb all the information that we're going to try to cover in an hour's time. But we've done this so taxpayers, community members, and individuals could have a better understanding of how to access the information, because I think information is the key to the community embracing student learning. So when you click on the Fountain Lake School District page, brings you into our home page, and you got numerous tabs at the top. If you notice on the left-hand side, you see home. The one that we're going to be discussing tonight is millage. And the information from the context of the school district's perspective, everything we're presenting to you is presented to you in a factual format. Of course, we feel as though that there's a need, but we're trying to share information with you so that each individual taxpayer can make a decision as to whether they want to vote no or yes based on the context of the information. So my job is to present information and give you an opportunity to review it, share it with your friends, share it with additional individuals. The other form that's out front before we dive in here is a voter registration. So for or against, if you know individuals that are uncertain whether they're registered to vote, you can pick up a voter registration form. The final day to register to vote is April the 22nd. So we still have a few weeks in that time, but it's nearing fast. So when you click on the millage button, that tab takes us to, as you can see, voter registration deadline. And in 41 days, we're going to vote on this issue, and we'll know the end result. And then the board will continue to guide their decision-making process either with access to new funds for student learning, or they will turn to look at existing funds and determine how to allocate those moving forward. And so they've been reviewing the financial conditions of the district for some time. In February, they chose to put a 4 mil initiative out before the public to consider. And so it's left the boardroom and is now going to be on the ballot for the community to vote on. And so the outcome of the vote will then determine yes, utilize the funds, no, the board reconvenes and looks at how they structure budgets with existing money. It's honestly that simple. What I'm trying to share with you tonight is if we have a yes vote, what do we get out of it? Because if you're a taxpayer, you want to know where your tax dollars are going. So if we kind of scroll across and look at the top, we've got documents, facts, frequently asked questions, key dates, a millage calculator, which in a millage calculator, let's click on that. Just go to the obvious first. What do I have to pay? And in that, it's in a web browser. If you have an appraised value of a home of, let's say, $250,000 that you're paying property taxes on, if we plug in $250,000, it's going to cost that taxpayer an estimated amount of $200 new money over your current property tax. So that would be the impact. If you have a $150,000 home, calculating that at $120. If you would back out of that and go back to your documents over to the Documents tab, in the Documents tab, what we're going to run through this evening is the millage presentation. Basically, any document that we hand to you as a sheet of paper, you could replicate it by going into this website, print it off on your own computer, because everything that we are using as facts is a part of this millage website. So click on the millage presentation. Here again, we've just accessed a document. Let's put that in present form, John, so we can kind of go through it. Might be easier to read. Some of the slides that are in here are reflective of, I think the first 3 slides is a handout that you have before you, and that's the white handout. First part of that, and the top portion of that handout is financials. A few things you need to know as to the decisions the board has rendered, and what I've been reviewing in the 2.5 years that I've been employed here in the district is our real property assessment has remained flat statistically since 2011. There's a huge debate as to the level of wealth the district holds, but the current property assessment has been flat since 11. The per pupil expenditure, and that's how much money we have for each child, has been steadily declining since 2013. So our board has been monitoring some trends, and their job is to work with me on policy and fiscal responsibility and financial positioning of the school district long term. Yes, we design a budget every year, but we want to design a budget that is sustainable through time. And so that's what we've kind of embraced and looked at. And these 2 things that we see as the first 2 bullets, they concern the Board of Education. The third thing is, as we look at a 3-year projection of budget, over the next 3 years, if the first 2 things remain constant, especially the assessment, if it continues to remain flat, we're charting a course where we're going to be deficit spending, and we don't intend to deficit spend as a functioning governance structure. We're going to have to balance our expenses with our revenue to have a balanced budget. Current needs and legislative requirements is something else that's on your sheet, and this assumes a relatively flat enrollment. The legislative requirements, we're going to get hit with increases to minimum wage that we're going to have to comply with the current funding mechanisms that we have in place. Current millage rate is the lowest in Garland County. If we pass this millage in the little trifold brochure, if you look at that, our new millage rate would be 38.8. Our current millage rate is 34.8. And so currently it's the lowest in the county. It's never a competition to compete in taxes, but I think it's relevant for all taxpayers to know what you pay in relationship to the neighborhood, because each individual school district has a millage established based on community vote. And so those vary greatly. The highest, I think, on that list, if you look on that brochure, is Cutter just recently passed a millage to save their school and build a new high school. And so if you drive by there, they're in the process of construction right now. Dirt work, footings going up. Talked to Dr. Anderson the other day. The last time the voters engaged in what we're doing right here, 1990. 1990, the community engaged and built the gymnasium and built this facility that we're in, and a couple of other buildings, but those were the two big ones. And so you had a millage increase in 90, and then you had a lawsuit that occurred that rolled the millage back in approximately 2007, 2008 timeframe. And so it went from 37 mills back to 34, which is currently at 34, but the last time the community took on a millage increase and actually voted on it was in 1990. The other things that we have there is, and it concerns us, we've had a difficult time retaining quality staff. And that's because the district has not had any modification to the base salary in the district since 2013. So the overall base rate of pay has not moved. It's been the same every year since 2013, and a portion of these funds would go towards retaining quality staff. So that's kind of the financials. The next slide kind of alludes to what I mentioned legislatively: minimum wage, rising cost of health insurance, and then staffing increases around mandated programs such as special education, counseling services, and additional paraprofessionals. So those are things that are beyond the board's control. Those are things that state law requires us to provide as a public entity. The third bullet, let's go to the next one if you could, John. Next slide. What we listed here for community members to understand is what are current and future district needs that must be addressed. And so as we continue to expand learning opportunities for students, we need to make sure we're providing not only resources in the classroom, but appropriate education for our teachers, and that's what we call professional development. So we're wanting to continue to support our teachers with additional professional development and invest in their development so that we can retain them long term. Quite frankly, what's been occurring to a certain extent is we're doing a really good job in our charter of being innovative and training teachers and spending quite a bit of money to train our teachers to deliver the work in the classroom, and then our neighboring districts with higher paying schedules are picking them off. And so we're paying pretty good money to invest in training, but we're not getting that long-term investment and return out of it, because in 3 to 4 years, typically we're losing those staff members. And so we'd like to retain them long-term by making our salaries more competitive. Other areas that probably, this is a pretty big concern because we have approximately 1,400 students in one cafeteria. As we continue to grow, this is an area that the board and myself, we've partnered with Chartwells to enhance nutritional value and provide a wider array of opportunities for students to pick different types of meals. And that portion has worked well, but we still have only a certain amount of square footage space. And so that's an area that concerns us quite a bit. If we continue to experience growth, that's probably an area that we're going to have to consider some form of an expansion. And when you get 1,500 students and beyond, it quite frankly becomes unrealistic to serve children under one roof, because we start serving right now around 10:30 and we get done around 1 o'clock. And so you really can't add, can't start serving students at 9:30 and getting done at 2 o'clock, because if your child's on either end of that spectrum, probably not going to like that, nor will the kid. And so that's an area that we are looking at very closely. We have listed requirements. Something that has hurt our overall space constraints at the elementary level is we did have 3 sections of pre-K, and due to space constraints and financial constraints, we've reduced that to 2 sections of pre-K. That is a potential variable that's a negotiable that the state does not require us to have. But when you look at the research of educating a 4-year-old, the investment that you get in that child and getting them ready for kindergarten reduces your overall number of students in the first 4 years that are considered for special education referrals. So the investment on the front end is a great investment, but without enough money to sustain it, it'll be something that the board has to seriously consider the number of sections. In our proposal, we want to have preschool for every child that is an enrolled child. We currently have a wait list. We don't want a wait list. We want every child that's eligible for pre-K to have access to pre-K. And that's what our proposal would do. When you look at other things on the list, we've mentioned the salaries, pre-K classrooms, traffic flow for those that drop off, pick up every day. We continue to review that. We know we're going to have a widening of the highway, a stoplight coming in here. Those things concern us in terms of impact of growth, but it's also going to affect access onto the roadways. So we're going to need some money on our end to restructure how we get buses safely on and off of our campus, how we get all of our parents safely on and off of our campus as well. We are considering in this proposal, you'll see a roadway that would connect basically from Highway 5 and give us an alternative route to get over behind Safe Room B as a part of this proposal. Our transportation fleet in this proposal will be, we want newer buses. We don't want kids on buses that's 12 or 15 years old. And so with that, this proposal would, we're planning to buy 1 to 2 new school buses every year to reduce the age of the buses that we have in our transportation fleet. Do you have a question? Sure, speak loud, I'll repeat it. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So the question is, new buses, Wi-Fi capability. We've researched that. At this point, we've been in a constrained decision-making process of finance utilization. So the answer to your question is yes, those new buses would have capabilities for that. There's 2 things we're looking at in that context. One is for those longer routes, having connectivity. In the state of Arkansas, the hills and the hollers, what we face every day, it will be intermittent connectivity, because some of you may live somewhere where you still struggle to get connectivity, but that's a portion of it. The other thing that is available that we could fund with these, and I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but we do have the capability of utilizing software that would give notifications of how close the bus is and the proximity to the home. And so you could have that as a continuum so that you're not having to wait that 15 minutes at the stop or the bus is running a little early or running a little late. Those things happen. And so there's software available today that you can download an app and have proximity through GPS that is cost effective, but we cannot continue down a path of expenditures that are not, we have to take care of serving kids currently on the campus. Those are additional things as we view them. But anything we can do to save costs and enhance student learning, we always look at it. But yeah, that's a very good point. I think that's sufficient. We had listed, some of the board members have actually toured all of our athletic facilities. And they saw restrooms that were inadequate, showers that are no longer functional, just an array of things that definitely we don't have to rebuild everything, but we may need to consider remodeling some things. And in that, some areas are in need of repair and are undersized for the current enrollment. Keep in mind, some of the things that we built were built for a student population of 800 kids, maybe even 750, because you were a K-6 and a 712 environment at that time. And you're currently 3 varied buildings of K4, 5-8, and 9-12. Take us on through to another slide. Got another question, I'll repeat it. Sure, as it relates to security, currently what we have is mag locks throughout our campus. The additional security that we have added, some of these things we couldn't wait on. We spent $23,000 on a fence to make sure that our children walking from the 2-4 building could get safely to the cafeteria, and if they're not being supervised, they couldn't run and be out in the road. And so other elements of enhancement is at this point in time, 1 resource officer is still viewed as sufficient for a standalone campus here. It would be additional door mag locks, additional cameras, and then more importantly on the security and safety side, reconsidering additional sidewalks, trying to separate kids walking from cars is the best way for us to enhance the safety of our campus, because our greatest concern, we always have that threat element, but our greatest concern is that daily pedestrian traffic that's commingling with kids and cars. That's always our biggest anxiety. Anything else on that list? Good questions? Okay. Take us to the next, on this sheet, this kind of indicates what are some of the things we've done at this point. We embraced, well over a year ago, in a master facility planning process that kind of a component of that was surveying staff and administration, just talking to all the teachers, kind of talking through what they see, what works well, what doesn't work well. And then from there, we measured every building, its current utilization, went through that whole process. We have 19 buildings currently on our campus. And so we tried to identify the square footage space. We looked at mechanical, we looked at heating, we looked at electrical, because we not only have to take care of what we're going to build next, we have to make sure we're managing reoccurring cost of current facilities and making sure we take care of them first. And we really have a campus. I come in, prior board, Mr. Beckwith, we did not find a campus that was a cash flow drain. In that context, our mechanical was solid, didn't get an A, but probably a C+, B- range in terms of the quality of the mechanical. So we're not looking at a ton of reoccurring costs, but just as we are in this facility, there's some AC units that are aging out that are going to have to be replaced. And so you either wait till they die or replace them as needed. But we surveyed and we did this facility, master facility planning process that allowed for us to kind of get a snapshot of all existing buildings, because you got to protect what you have first before you consider what you're going to do next. And then we, other things that we did is if you're a parent, we release kids at closer to 2 on Wednesdays, and our staff collaborates to try to plan and prepare how they can better serve kids. And they do that from basically 2:30 to 3:30, and that's on Wednesdays. We've taken groups to different schools that are performing very highly and looked at things they're doing, and does it fit Fountain Lake? Can we replicate it? How do we get better? We constantly ask ourselves, how can we get better? And it doesn't always require money to get better. It requires us to ask ourselves first and foremost and create a culture of a continual improvement. You know, the East Lab partnered in measuring all the facilities, turned that over to the architect. B&F Engineering has done multiple surveys. We know the topography. Our goal is to identify 2 potential future building sites that are most cost effective based on the surveying conditions of the land we own. If you own land, you know it costs more to build on a hillside than it does to build on flat ground, and a school's no different. And so trying to find that location and elevation that best suits a cost-effective approach to construction. We purchased 20 acres behind the press box, and that's an area that we would like to connect a roadway, additional parking, access to the football stadium and events up there. All of that is a part of this discussion and proposal. Mentioned our partnering, and then I already mentioned the fence. So continue. This is just a brief millage history. I mentioned litigation. It was settled in '06. And so what you had happen in '06 is you had on the ballot, it's always easy to vote on the millage when the millage is going down. I mean, that's a no-brainer if it's on the ballot. So on the ballot, it stated, do you want to take the millage from 37.8 to 34.8? Guess what the community did at that time? They voted to reduce the millage at that point because basically by law, it was requiring a rollback. It has remained the same since 2007. And if you look all the way at the top, 1998, for a few years, it run between 32 and 31 mills. And for the historians in the crowd, when you think from 98 to 2015, think about the type of school you had and the level of services you had, and you're going to find that that's going to correlate in those time frames. Because if you talk to the educators and the teachers, there was times where it was hard to buy anything because of the uncertainty where the money was going to be. And so that gives you a reflection. That's just the history of the millage and the rate associated with that. We did not go back all the way to 90, basically pulling from 98 to 17. We thought that was sufficient historical information. This page here is a ton of numbers, and this was one that I would reference you back to, but it tells a story within itself, and what I'm going to do here is just give you 2 or 3 highlights. First thing I would do is share with you what you're looking at. You're looking at the district revenue and expenses from 2009 to 2018. Of that, this column displays revenue and total available funds, this column explains revenue, and this column explains expenses. I've got a typo right there we need to correct. In terms of use of the revenues, that's the equivalent of expenses, but the salaries through total expenses equates to this amount, and you can kind of compare what was the beginning balance to the ending balance. Beginning balance to ending balance. And in that exercise, about right here, in 11 to 12, something happened, and that was a restructuring of some existing debt, old debt, about the time that you opened some new buildings. So you took a balance of, you borrowed some money, and you also used some of your cash, because that's what these numbers are. That's the school fund balances. So that's the savings you have in the bank. And so they spent that down from a pretty good amount of money. That was also during the historical window of time where there was a partnership with the Walton Foundation, and they did some school bonuses to staff members based on student performance. I learned that as a component of just studying the history of the district. Nevertheless, it landed in 12 at about 1.9 million to 2 million, and then it went along, and then it started going down. And so anytime that it dramatically decreases, what's occurring in that scenario is you definitely are spending more than you're taking in. The 3 things I would highlight is some big state money that come in here in 13 and in 16 is when you applied for your charters. You had 2 different infusion of charter school grants, and you received in excess of $500,000 one-time money to purchase products, programs, and do training for staff, and in some instances, added staff. The key to what I'm trying to share with you is it was one-time money. So your charter schools that you have the vision of learning on that's career-oriented, That's part of the reason we're here. We're wanting to sustain that vision. And so we received that money once. One was for the middle school, one was for the high school. And so now we're at a crossroads where we want to keep everything because it's having a strong impact to student learning, but we're having a hard time figuring out how to fund it. The other thing that happened that probably constrained the district even more than the evolution of the charter is down here was your debt payment. And so every year you designed a budget, and here you had a $900,000 debt payment. But then when the money was restructured, it was restructured on an interest-only principal payment. Principal was deferred, interest was paid, at which point in time you had extra money because you went from a debt payment of $900,000 to roughly $400,000, so you had $500,000 you could go spend back up here. But what happens typically in a balloon payment of a home, there's going to be a sunset of that. Now, what I don't want you to be concerned about tonight is it's already sunset and readjusted. And so it went from $362 to, if you go out here, we're currently paying about $950,000. So what's happened to the board and myself is this payment has went up, and every time this payment goes up, before we even pay the light bill, we're required to send the bank their money. So the very first payment we make every year is the debt payment. And then we pay the light bill, then we pay resources, then we pay for consideration of other things, even wireless. And that's kind of the process that the board uses in decision making. But this story that's being told here, there's never a true fault, because probably the motivating factor was to deal with growth and not do what to the millage rate? What's that? It did not increase the millage rate. So you built the middle school, you built the safe room, you built those buildings, you handled your growth, and you didn't have to increase the burden to the taxpayer. And the assumption was one thing. I wasn't here, but the assumption would be is that the assessment would do what? Grow. If the assessment grows, it garners new money. But then we go back to 11. What did we say about the assessment since 2011? Flat. And so, this situation has kind of evolved over time. This Board of Education will deal with this situation, and we'll deal with it on the expenditure side if the community doesn't deal with it on the revenue side. Because we have three levers to work with. Either that balance, which we've grown back slightly. Over the 3 years that I've been here, we've been able to increase those balances slightly. But now with minimum wage and other things, we're concerned about what that future looks like. That's one lever, the balance. The other lever is for us to control expenses. That's the one that the board can control, and typically the parents of the community feel it the most because it affects people and programs. And then the third lever that the community can grab is the one that we're here tonight to discuss. And does the community want to grab a revenue lever? It'll be done through votes. Everybody in here gets one vote, and we'll count up all the votes, and either that will produce new revenue or we'll work with existing revenue. So let's go to that next slide. I have this in here not because we're building this. This was a site location if we move forward with an elementary school. You need to understand that this elementary school right now is not a part of this proposal. It's a future building site location near the back of our campus. We've also, through site elevations, found that maybe the middle of the campus could be a future site location. And then, of course, the most controversial issue for a community is if you don't like either one of those two places for an elementary school, we got to go buy land and build it somewhere else. Because there's no place to put anything else in here unless it continues to impact negatively parking and traffic. And so we're at that tipping point where we're trying to figure out how to pull some kids further out of the heart of the campus. The roadway that we mentioned might run from here adjacent. Those are not a part of proposal either. We've scrapped all of this because to do everything that's on this sheet of paper was about 9 mills. And we visited, talked, and we just did not feel as though, if we've not run a millage, there's no way we can run one at 8.5, realistically at 8. So we've pared it down to 4 mills, and in the 4 mills, we've kind of focused on the people, and we want to objectively build a roadway, possibly a preschool center would be the 2 big things that we build, and then we really take care of the eroding asphalt, take care of sidewalks on our existing campus, along with any mechanical issues that we have is what we'd be using the money that we're borrowing. Let's go to that next slide. Kind of indicating our current needs. I'm not going to be repetitive here. Go back and look at this. The only thing I have not listed is just the sheer demand for, we have a lot of different kids that walk through the door here at Fountain Lake. Great kids and kids that are really in a tough spot. And those kids in a tough spot, they need additional support. And social emotional is counseling services. It's support systems not only for the kid, but also the family, because usually to help the kid, you got to help the family and the kid simultaneously in those situations. And so a portion of these funds would directly impact the level of services that we provide, because we're meeting the minimum of counselors in the district currently. Let's go on to the next slide. I've kind of indicated everything here. I'm going to try to explain what this will do on the following slide. Let's go to the next one. This kind of identifies our current millage rate. We've discussed that, and you can see that in relationship to assessment. You've heard of adequacy. Public schools have adequate funding mechanisms because some schools don't have any assessment and they're funded heavily by the state. Other schools have big assessment and big enrollment, and they're funded 50-50 between the state and the local effort. It just depends on the balance of the assessment, and you can see that we have a relatively high assessment and we're growing in our student count. When this student count right here was 900 kids with that assessment, you're a wealthy district. But because you went from 900 to 1,400, you're not so wealthy anymore. And so if we can grow this number dramatically and create the type of relationship that coexisted when it was 900 kids, it would change the overall per pupil expenditure, and it wouldn't be going down, it would then go up. Take us to that last slide here, and we'll do kind of a summary. I need to mention this on the $6 million we're borrowing, because we are borrowing $6 million. It's going to extend out from, I think, 36, 37 to 2049, the overall 1.5 debt mills. Next slide. This gives you a lot of numbers here again, but I'm going to try to educate you on what you're looking at. This column over here on the left is the mills across the tops of school years. So what I've tried to do here is create a template for the Board of Education of how we would use the funds, and a template for the community on how we would use the funds. Depending on who gets elected to the Board of Education, ultimately they have the final say in operating expenditures, but we've allocated about 1.75 mils to salaries. And this would take our salaries from roughly $38,000 on the base to $42,000 on the base through a 4-year period. It would make us very competitive with Lakeside and Lake Hamilton's current salary schedule, but in 4 years, they're probably going to do what? They're going to go higher. Keep in mind, if we don't pass this millage, there's no way that this board can design a change in the base rate of pay. The second component of it is we are committing to additional preschool staffing that will give us up to 5 sections of preschool, because we roughly have 100 kids in a class. And we need to have, with 20 kids, we need to have a minimum of 5 sections. Currently, we offer 2. Transportation, 1/4 mil would buy buses every year. Professional development, 3/10 would equate to and provide for curriculum. We're going to hammer forward with a solid literacy program K through 8, and it's going to require money. and this board and myself will be faced with other additional cuts in order to sustain our literacy program, because at the core value, goal 1, is literacy. And so our goal would be is for the community to partner with us to be able to fund what we're trying to fund. And if you look, none of the money comes in until 2021. That's because we're setting a budget for 2021 here. We'll design a budget under the current millage rate for next year, which will be the 19-20 year. No new money coming in until 2021. That's why the board felt it was imperative to at least get the community engaged, because the earliest money that we would receive would be about the time that the road construction is being completed. And so 2021 will be the school year that we actually receive funds in. The 3 items we're going to build out is roughly a $2.6 million early learning center. We will also build out and enhance roadway, parking, and site development at roughly 2.4, and then we'll address pavement issues, overlays, sidewalks on campus at roughly $1 million, and then securing additional entryways as well as the cafeteria expansion, and that's a total borrowing in that regard. You can reference that page. Hopefully it makes a little bit of sense to you in terms of the breakout of the funds. But you can see it runs from 1920 all the way through 2023 and puts us in a sustainability model. And it does give us some additional funds that we could be deferring, and one, we could take and hopefully build some cash balances back, because this really does not truly, if we experience additional growth, we've got to figure out how to manage growth moving forward and keep the tax rate as low as we can. That's what we're trying to do. We don't want to just tax for the sake of taxing. We're hoping that we can experience some growth with the new roadways, and in the scenario that we have, we're not building truly future space. You need to understand that. We're building out space to give us some flexibility in the elementary and an opportunity to sustain here at the secondary level. The only thing that's on this list, not on this list, that we have had some discussion around is whether we could add to our vocational center programming to make sure that we're dealing with the high school space constraints. You need to know right now our greatest constraints in space are at the elementary and the high school. Middle school's cramped, but we could restructure some things there and still have space moving forward as we look at grade level reconfigurations, things of that nature. So what's the last slide that we have? I'm going to kind of run back through. We've addressed some questions at this point. I want to kind of open up. We're going to take a moment tonight because we've had about 5 editorials. I'm going to give Mr. Campbell an opportunity to discuss school choice with you guys and how that's affecting school funding, and allow for some questions around that topic. But any specific thing that we didn't get a chance to maybe speak up and ask a question about, a certain slide that you'd want to go back to and reference? Okay. So we'll have an opportunity for some additional questions. We can always pull one of these slides back up. John, if you don't mind, take us back to that millage page. We've had quite a bit of dialogue around school choice and the influence that has on our school district. We researched that in 2013, 2014, we had roughly 90 kids that were school choice, and today we have 98. I couldn't find a trend of a significant shift in the number of children that you're serving in school choice. The only thing we saw that could have affected it back 12 years ago, you had closer to 30 to 35. And we are in a desegregation county that requires you to select a race, and you actually are denied school choice based on space of the district or the racial makeup. And so whoever has the highest whoever has the lowest racial makeup. If Mark wants to go to Jessieville and the white population of Jessieville is 88% and it's 84% at Fountain Lake, he will be denied going to Jessieville based on his race. And so we've been trying to get that removed. Just as soon as I sat down in the chair, there was litigation going on that. It's been ruled it's Eighth Circuit Court and was denied, and so we're still under the desegregation school choice timelines, which are actually different than the state of Arkansas's school choice timeline. So I've given you an intro. I want you to do a fill-in. I'll give you a mic.
There's really nothing magical about school choice. It's a law, and we're required to comply with that law. We're required to be a school choice school, just like every other school in the state of Arkansas. And so we comply with that law. We're required to advertise that we're a school choice school. And so we comply with that law. And the two ways that we are supposed to comply with that law is in print, which we do with a legal notice in the want ads, and in some form of broadcast media, which we do with the other county schools in one ad that we do over the radio stations. So we do comply with the law. We don't put up billboards. We don't have jingles. We don't put full-color ads trying to recruit people to be school choice. Many schools do because it is a cash flow positive for them. For us, it is not a cash flow positive. Saying that, this district has adopted every student every day for success as its mission. And so as far as the folks in the buildings, every student is every student that walks in the door. We're not looking at addresses, and we're not looking at where they're coming from. We're just taking care of those kids as the best we can. So I wanted to say that on the front end. We saw a significant jump in school choice all the way back in 2006 and 2007, and that was because of consolidation over with Perrin and Bryant when they actually closed the Perrin High School. And so we got a large number of school choice. Actually, we had 13 new school choice students in 2006 and 2007, and a large number of those students were from the Perrin School District. We didn't really see another significant jump until we, in 13-14, after we had opened the middle school and that new buildings out there on the highway, we saw the numbers begin to run about 30 a year. And they've run anywhere from 27 to 31 since that point in time. But it has been pretty consistent at that rate. Saying that, we have between 13 and 15 students that school choice out of Fountain Lake each year to go somewhere else. In fact, this year we had 13 school choice students from Jessieville, and we had 13 school choice students from Fountain Lake that went to Jessieville. So we have, it's not balanced, it's not even. We have more that choice in than choice out, but we do have students that choice out as well. We have students who've never attended Fountain Lake. They have always been a school choice student all of their lives. So it's not that they came here, had a bad experience, and wanted to go away. It's because of convenience for family or where grandparents live so that the elementary kid could get picked up, and if they were sick and the parents are working in town, then there's someone available, that sort of thing. We don't have a real pure count on school choice. This is our number as of the October 1 count. One of the issues that we experience is that, particularly this time of year, if someone knows that they're going to be moving, okay, and they aren't sure where they're going to be moving, they will file school choice papers right now so that they can be sure that they are in the district. So in our July 1 numbers are going to be one set of numbers. Our October 1 numbers will be a more accurate count after all of that begins to settle out. we have to deny students choice. In the past couple of years, we've had to deny because classrooms in the middle school were too crowded. So we have had to reject at certain grade levels. I think 5th and 7th or 6th and 8th was a grade level that we've had to reject. We had to close kindergarten last year. We in 4th grade. Okay. Yeah. Right. So we have had to reject folks. This year, our count, we have 30 school choice students in the elementary, 30 school choice students in the middle school, and 32 school choice students in the high school. So it's evenly divided among the buildings. There's not a big mass number of students. Saying that, there's no grade level where we have enough school choice students that we would be able to say no to them and eliminate a teaching position. Does that make sense to everyone? There aren't 25 4th grade school choice students which we could say no to, send them away, and eliminate a 4th grade teaching position. Does that make sense? So as far as the cost involved, it divides the cost out among more bodies. It divides the per pupil expenditure out by more people, but it doesn't eliminate the expenditure. We would still have those teachers in place. So, and then that's pretty much school choice in a nutshell. All right. Questions on school choice or those things that I said? And I'll probably have to find the answer for you. All right. And we have the mics up then, so we'll take any questions at this point in time.
Thank you for all the documents, and I didn't pick up a packet, but if those last spreadsheets where you're showing the comparison for income and expenses, if it's not out there, I'll just log on and print one out. My curiosity question is, if you're paying almost $800,000 in debt service now per year, what is your current debt load?
Sure. Our current amount that we have borrowed is roughly $12 million total. It's just short of that. It is listed in one of the documents. Scott is here with us tonight. The payoffs of our debt will be staged in 25, 26. If we could have somebody go look, we'll pull that up. Take us back to the number. Do you have a booklet with you, Scott? Yeah, I'm going to let him address so we get it accurately for you in terms of when the two payoffs occur. Do you have that?
I'm sorry, Marjorie McCleskey, Saline County, Hot Springs Village. I was supposed to do that first.
Hey, good evening. The school district currently has 2 loans outstanding. One was originated August the 24th of 2010. As of the start of the school year, June 30th of 2018, the balance was $1,840,000. The second bond issue or loan the district has is from September of 2012. And as of the start of the school year, the balance was $10,705,000. Does that answer your question, or
Yeah,
did you want to know?
I was just curious.
Okay.
And so your current debt is made up of 2 previous. Do you ever refinance all of it?
So the district evaluates that all the time. The first loan is basically at 0% interest because it had a federal subsidy. And the other loan that's outstanding, the district could not meet the state requirements in order to refinance it. And so that was certainly something that was evaluated, but it's at a low rate of interest as well.
Okay, a follow-up question or similar on finances. So if you get if you get a sufficient yes vote and it goes forward, 4 mills go forward, you're going to borrow $6 million to do everything that's on the current list, not what would have been 9 mills
That's correct.
on the current list. Are you going to borrow that all at once or as you phase it in over several years?
You're required to borrow and expend the equivalence of the ballot language within a total of 3 years. So
Okay.
we would access, the bonds would sell, we'd have access to the money July or August on the total $6 million. And then we would have an obligation to expend those funds within a 3-year window. And I want to go back and help clarify one other issue, because you asked a key question that this board chose not to do. Each of those notes that Scott described are separate payoffs. One is 2627, or the second is 3738 or 3637. $36.37. And so when we initiate this note, it will have a payoff in $48.49. But
Right.
we're not refinancing and bundling all of them, so we want those notes to pay off in sequences of time, because depending on our space constraints, we will have some flexibility in the 26-27 year. If we don't grow and we hit a bubble of growth, say 3 years after the roadways come in, not the first year, then we would be much closer to the 26-27 to create a reallocation of, it would require a vote of the people, but we might be able to do it at a much lesser mill increase, maybe a
Right.
mill, and then commingle the debt we've paid off to facilitate that note. So a major decision this board made was to not put all those notes into a bundle and refinance them when we had, one, setting at 0% interest, and two, a comparable average. Interest rates currently did not behoove us to refinance that note.
I appreciate that you, on one of the slides, and I'll print it out when I get home, that of the 6 million, where the money's going to go. Because
Yes.
that's, ever since you announced 4 mills is going to be on the ballot, it's like, I understand all the key points, but how much is going for that? And
Right.
how much is going for that? Okay, hypothetical, it doesn't pass,
Sure.
and then you're going to have to cut, because you're going to have
Well, I
to
think,
cut.
you know,
Has there been discussion on how you would prioritize the most important things? So let's say a year from now, so if if it doesn't pass, a year from now, you would come in and ask for maybe 1 or 2 mills, and do you know which items you would be
Right.
asking for first?
I think that is beyond board engagement. It's a community engagement exercise, and so we are initially running and asking for this amount of money, but your question is, how would you prioritize the level of cuts that you make and what you would do next? And the two things that I would guide the board in considering, they would not have to do it, but one of those two things would be to really take anyone who is supporting education and wants to have a stake and interest, and as I've learned the diversity of the Fountain Lake community, it needs to be full of parents and village taxpayers. And it needs to necessitate a facilitation process where, first and foremost, all taxpayers know the programs we're providing. Because I'd see a distinct variance between a village taxpayer that may not come to our schools and a parent who is being provided services. So in that context, that group of 75 people helps this group determine what to keep and what to cut. Secondly, that same discussion around what to keep and what to cut facilitates the direction we take with a millage campaign for next year, because the need is not going to go away.
Right.
At which point in time we'd be back on the ballot again in 19, and I've seen those go two ways. I've seen them be 2, and I've seen them be 6. And that's unpredictable. That's based on the community, level of engagement, and the embracement within the community. I would not anticipate, knowing the diversity of our community, that it would accelerate for more. That's typically where you've got a ton of parents in a populace, in a white-collar community where, well, we didn't ask for this, and we didn't ask for this, and the board forgot to ask for this, so that's why I voted no. You put those 3 things on there, it costs more money, and everybody votes yes. In our dynamic, in that exercise, I don't know how that'll play out. But
Yeah,
that would be the two strategies I would guide the board, because it'll have to be a much deeper level of engagement if we're going to not be in compliance with the charter program, choose a specific elective program. Currently, we offer a variety of electives. And the question is going to be, which one are you going to cut? Or are you going to turn towards fine arts? Or are you going to turn towards athletics?
I know, very,
There is no, when you start down that path, I led a school district had a $20 million budget, and through a period of 5 years, because the board did not want it to go to the community, we cut $1.2 million.
I would, just as a minor comment from reading everything that comes into my email, social media, the Village Voice, I no longer read the Democrat Gazette. I think it would be wise for you guys to figure out a way to itemize where that 4 mills, what that actually means, and what it's going to enable us to do.
Okay.
Because you've got people I know well that are relatively against the 4 mills for
Right.
various reasons, and a lot of the editorial comments, I know those. So I think if you did smarter advertising as to exactly what those 4 mills, why we need it, and how it will better this school district and these children.
Okay.
Because I think what's stuck, especially for villagers, is, 4 mills, how much is that going to cost me on
Right.
my house? And they're just going to do whatever.
Right.
So I
And it's
think
going to
if
be a
you-
blank check with no purpose.
Yes. I think if you could do better spotlights of where that money is going to go.
And that is factual information, and we could do that through district funds. When it moves to kind of that vote yes element is when I've got to rely on the Friends of Fountain Lake group to facilitate that information.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Anyone else, other questions? Okay, Dana, I'm going to kind of, oh, you guys questions? Come on up. You've got to go. That's quite all right. She's got to escape and go to another meeting. That's fine. Dana, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ms. McCluskey. We appreciate your comments, and we will take that in an advisement and do some focused advertising there. Any other questions? It's 7:03, so we said we were going to try to get out by 7. We appreciate those of you who are here tonight, and for those who might watch this later on our website, the board welcomes your questions anytime. If you don't feel comfortable asking them now, please contact Dr. Murphy or myself or any of the board members. We would love to have the opportunity to answer any questions you might have. We hope that you will register to vote if you are not already. And like Dr. Murphy said, there are forms out there in the lobby. Be sure to pick some up for yourself or friends of yours. And we would just encourage you to get the facts and make an educated vote on May 21st. And
Additional public meetings, our board meeting coming up
yes,
Thursday, and then the additional forum
at the village, yes. Next Thursday is our regular board meeting at 5 o'clock in the administration building if you would like to come. And there will be an agenda on the website if you want to see what we're going to be talking about at that meeting. Also, we're going to do the same kind of forum in the village on May the 2nd. And did we pick a time yet? 5:30? Okay, at 5:30 in the Coronata Center.
And you need to heavily advertise that in the Village Voice ahead of time.
Oh, yes, I think you're working on.
And it wouldn't have to be a paid ad, it could just be an article.
Okay, yes, and I think Dr. Murphy has.
I'd like advisement on how I can get greater access to the voice. I'm going to contact Jeff Meek again.
I think he's trying to. I know the village has had a lot going on in the voice with the recent POA elections, yeah, and all that stuff. So we are trying to get an article in there. Yeah, it has.
It's been thick.
Yes.
There's been a lot going on out there. But May the 2nd, you can tell anyone, it's open to anybody, whether they live in the village or not, in the community. It's open May the 2nd, Coronata Center at 5:30. So if there are no other questions, we'll be around here for a few minutes if you have anything you want to come see us about. Otherwise, thanks for being here, and we appreciate y'all listening to us, and hope you'll get out and vote on May the 21st. Thanks, and have a good night.